So in this video, we're going to discuss how to pick an event, and it might seem a little bit condescending, but there is actually quite a few factors I think people should take into account before they decide on an event. The first one really is the distance, and if we're talking about triathlon, you've got your key distances, your Ironman, half Ironman, Olympic, sprint, etc. Okay. When you're making that decision about perhaps jumping up to Ironman or half Ironman from whatever your stage you're at, the thing you really need to start by considering is your time availability. So I would genuinely recommend sitting down with a calendar and working out, all the things in your life that take up your time. So work, family, etc. And just taking the time to figure out actually how much time you have to train per day, and go through each 7 days and work it out. And the things you need to make sure you are taking account of are things like, if we're just talking about training, getting changed, having to shower afterwards, having to stretch afterwards. Make sure you feed all those into your assessment of how much time you got to train, and then also make sure that you're making a realistic assessment of your working hours. The time that you need to set aside to look after family, to see friends, all that other stuff outside of training. So whilst you might have just a very cut and dry time availability, really it's much more complicated than that. And so I guess the message is to be really objective in how you assess how much time availability you have, because ultimately you can't turn sort of 5 hours into 15 if it's just not there. And you do want to be sensible about how much time you have, because Ironman in particular is a really big commitment, big time commitment, and if you just don't have the adequate amount of capacity for it, it's going to become a huge form of stress, and ultimately you want to be able to enjoy these things. So just make sure you assess how much time you truly have in order to train, assess how much total availability you have, and that is basically your peak training volume that you can achieve. Okay. The second thing you really want to consider is the timing of your event, and this is actually something that I see people getting wrong quite often. So the first thing is, if you choose an early season A race, like an early season big event, so May, June, perhaps even beginning of July, you have to understand that you're probably going to have to train pretty hard through the winter. And it's a mistake I see a lot of people make, is they'll struggle to get their base mileage done through the winter, and it'll come to sort of February, March time, and all of a sudden they've got a really big ramp in order to get up to race distance. So you really want to make sure that you bear that in mind. And then second thing on timing, for female athletes, it's easier said than done, but if you can, you really want to try and time your goal race, your A race. You want to try and time it so that it's at a low hormone phase in your menstrual cycle. So you want that extra power output. You don't necessarily want to be dealing with other issues come race day. And so if you can, try to time that goal race to coincide with a low hormone phase, so that you can be a lot more confident that you're going to be firing on all cylinders. Thirdly, you definitely want to assess what the likely climate is going to be. Okay, so again, going back to an early season race, if you've booked an early season race and it's somewhere very, very warm, and you live in Northern Europe, and in particular in Britain, that is going to be a big adaptation. So if you go from sort of, close to zero, and then there's a 20-degree swing to where you're going to race, that is going to be a big change, and your body is going to find it very hard to maintain a steady core temperature if you're making that big of a jump. So you really want to take that into consideration. If you're a heavy sweater, things like that, you have to take this stuff into account. Often we all like to pick events where we can go have a nice holiday as well. but you don't want that holiday to turn into hell, basically, because you picked an event which isn't appropriate for you. All right, and then the other thing you want to assess, and a really kind of key one, is the course itself. So as another example, if you're picking a particularly hilly race with 10-kilometer climbs in it, we don't have many of those in Britain, so you're going to struggle to prepare for it in a way that you might like, and so you do have to assess that. Do you have the topography around you that will enable you to prepare for the event adequately? Not trying to put a downer on it. Obviously, we all want to kind of use racing as an opportunity to get away and enjoy ourselves. But these are some key factors that you do want to take into account and look at things objectively, because otherwise, you might feel a little bit disappointed with your result, and it can come down to something simple as you probably shouldn't be racing in 30-degree heat when you come from your home country where it's 10 degrees or something. So just a few things to think about, and hopefully not too much of a downer.